Welcome to the FCC webinar, Affordable Connectivity Program and Broadband Mapping, brought to you by the National Association of Regional Councils. My name is Ike Stage. I'm a six-term mayor from a community of about 43,000 in Central Ohio. Also a 20-year member of the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. Our community has been involved by broadband through actually activating a series of fiber costing about $6.9 million, which the city paid for itself. The functionality of that broadband was connect other public entities. We are working with other groups to make sure we have a digitally inclusive network that must be robust. So today we are joined by the administration staff from the Federal Communications Commission. They are here to tell us that about one of the new programs, the Affordable Connectivity Program, or ACP, as well as their continued efforts around the broadband mapping. So without further delay, I will turn things over to our speakers, and I'll start with Sean.
Thanks so much, Ike. Thanks for having us. It's great to be here and to talk to you about the work that the Commission is doing to improve its broadband availability maps. My name is Sean Spivey. I serve as senior counsel to the Broadband Data Task Force, which is a cross-agency task force that FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel stood up last February to help with implementation of the Broadband Data Act, which was a law that Congress passed in March of 2020, directing the Commission to improve the granularity and the accuracy of the agency's broadband availability maps and our broadband data collection, which is what we're calling our new collection to get better data. So with that, I'll just kind of jump in. I don't have a deck, but I'm just going to kind of give a status update of the work we've done up to this point, the work that is left to do. And my understanding is we will have some time for Q&A at the end. But to start out, to provide a little table setting, I probably don't have to tell many folks on this call, but for those of you that may be unbaptized in how the Commission currently collects broadband data, we currently collect it through something called the FCC Form 477. That data has been criticized for a while now because it is not very granular and it is not very standardized. And what I mean by that is fixed broadband service providers report in the Form 477 on where they have deployed broadband, but they report based on US census blocks, of which there are about 11 million. They vary in size, particularly out west. They are very large, out in the east and kind of, metropolitan areas, they can be as small as a city block, but out west and in other parts of the country, they can be very large. And under the rules for the 477, just by the way that the system was designed and set up, if a fixed broadband service provider makes service available at one location within a census block, then it marks the entire census block as served. So obviously that hasn't really allowed for a very granular picture of where broadband is and isn't available throughout the country. On the mobile side, mobile wireless providers report in the 477 by technology, so 3G, 4G, 5G service, and they report based on minimum advertised speeds or speeds that a consumer should reasonably expect to receive in a coverage area. But beyond that, the form did not really have any sort of standardized parameters for how mobile service providers would submit that data. So they could submit, based on different speed metrics, based on different assumptions about things such as network loading or, power from the transmitter, things of that nature. So it did not really allow for an apples to apples comparison of coverage among mobile service providers. So as I mentioned, in March of 2020, Congress passed the Broadband Data Act, which basically directed the Commission to overhaul its processes for collecting broadband data from fixed and mobile service providers. It also included some mechanisms to help verify and validate that data. Things like a challenge process, a user-friendly challenge process that consumers and governmental entities can participate in, processes whereby the FCC goes out and verifies data independently, things like audits, It also included a mechanism whereby we could receive verified availability data from other federal agencies, from state, local, and tribal governmental entities that are primarily responsible for mapping or tracking broadband availability, as well as third parties if they have certain indicia of reliability. Unfortunately, when Congress passed that bill in March of 2020, they did not make any funding available to the FCC to implement it. We needed funds to basically build a new system to collect this data, to go out and do that kind of verification work. They also directed that we create something called the Broadband Serviceable Location Fabric, which is a common data set of all locations in the United States where broadband service should be expected to be received. Believe it or not, we did not have a data set like that, basically identifying at a particular latitude and longitude a given location where that should expect to receive service. As you can imagine, it's that could be quite challenging. You need to kind of know where broadband needs to be delivered and how those areas differ from things like a garage or a tool shed or what have you. So but we didn't have any funds to go out and procure that data set. So it wasn't until December of 2020 that we actually received funding to do that. But we were able to kind of get the process going, notwithstanding us not having funding, by adopting a couple of reports and orders implementing the requirements of that legislation. We adopted a second report and order in July of 2020, which basically came up with the reporting standards, adopted the Broadband Serviceable Location Fabric as the foundation for fixed broadband reporting, as well as some processes that we would use to verify data submitted by service providers. In January 2021, we also adopted a third report and order in which we further refined that process and came up with parameters for the challenge process, as well as delegated some of the technical requirements for the mobile challenge process and the mobile verification process to some of our bureaus and offices, and established requirements for collecting verified coverage data from governmental entities. As I mentioned, I'm part of a task force that was created by Chairwoman Rosenworcel. She did that in February of last year. And then most recently, with the passage of the infrastructure bill in November, that does have an effect on some of the work that we're doing in terms of just modifications we need to make to some of our collections. But, and as you all are probably aware, most relevant, the legislation says that the $42.5 billion that NTIA will make available to block grants to eligible entities, including states and territories, will be based on the information that's included in our broadband maps. So I'd like to kind of step through what we've done most recently and where we need to go, as I mentioned. So a couple of things, starting with last summer. Last summer, we issued a request for proposals to procure that Fabric data set that I was talking about. We also entered into a contract with an IT developer to build the new system that will ingest this new, more granular data. We issued a public notice proposing some very technical rules for how we will handle the challenge process and the verification process on the mobile side. The legislation is very clear that we need to create a user-friendly challenge process, and we have done that by allowing anyone who wants to participate in the mobile challenge process to download a speed test app. Right now, the FCC speed test app is the one that is approved for use, but we will very soon be issuing guidance on how we will approve other third-party apps for use in this process. But basically, anyone can download an app, including state, local, and tribal governmental entities, run a speed test, and assuming they've made the necessary certifications, can submit that speed test, and that would form the basis of challenge data on the mobile side. But there are a lot of rules that we needed to adopt for how we would actually handle that data once it came in and ultimately adjudicate a challenge. As you could probably imagine, it's not very sustainable administratively for either the service providers or for us to do this on a one-for-one basis. One speed test result comes in, provider responds, we adjudicate. So we proposed thresholds for how we would kind of aggregate speed tests together to rise to what we call a cognizable challenge, at which point the mobile service provider has to respond with a similar amount of data in the other direction, showing that they actually that they do provide service there, that they would need to use to rebut the challenge once it was created. So things like that. It was fairly technical. It's a pretty long public notice. But so we actually hosted a webinar shortly after we published it, and that all these materials are available on our website. I'm going to plug our website multiple times. This will be the first time. fcc.gov/broadband data. It is a great place to find information about this project. But the other thing we did in the summer was we actually had the 4 largest mobile service providers submit their data using the BDC parameters, but in the old Form 477. So, one of the unfortunate things about 477 is because there was no standardization on the mobile side, the mobile providers could really submit in a lot of different ways. And what we did is we asked them to submit using all the standardized parameters we adopted for 4G LTE. So for 4G LTE, they have to show where coverage is available using speed benchmarks of 5 megabits per second download and 1 megabit per second upload. And that's at the cell edge with a 90% cell edge probability and assuming a 50% network loading factor. So we basically, that's a long way of saying we got an apples to apples look from the 4 largest providers of where their LTE service should be expected to be received. And we made those maps available on our website as kind of a preview of what we expect the new data to look like once everyone starts submitting in this new process. So in the fall, following on that RFP process, we actually issued an award for the Broadband Serviceable Location Fabric to a company called CostQuest Associates. We issued that on November 9th. Unfortunately, shortly thereafter, another bidder filed a protest on the procurement award with the Government Accountability Office. That actually started that we had to issue a stop work order based on that, which prevented us from interacting in any capacity with the vendor until GAO resolved the protest. GAO had 100 days to do that, and they took basically the whole 100 days. But the good news is they issued a decision on February 24th entirely in the FCC's favor, and we were able, immediately on that day to resume discussions with our vendor, and we've been working at a breakneck pace to do all the things that we need to do, which I'll talk in a little bit more detail what that is, to get the fabric data ready for the start of the filing period. We've done other things like we held an initial technical assistance workshop for tribal governmental entities on December 8th. That workshop is also available on our website. And we're entering into contracts with several groups to provide technical assistance to filers in advance of the filing window. So most recently, and what you all will probably care most about is in late February, we issued a public notice announcing when we were going to start the initial collection based on the new rules. And we are going to start that on June 30th of this year. So internet service providers will need to submit availability data as of June 30th, so showing their network deployment as of June 30th, and they can submit it starting that day in the window in the filing system, and it will be due no later than September 1st of this year. So we actually, as part of that, we issued detailed data specifications explaining the format for how the internet service providers need to submit that availability data. Now, importantly, I've mentioned once or twice that, under the Broadband Data Act, governmental entities that are primarily responsible for mapping or tracking broadband coverage are also permitted to file primary availability data. They're not required to, and governmental entities can participate in the process in other ways, like submitting challenge data or submitting crowdsourced data, but this is also an available option to governmental entities. We have made clear, though, that to the extent a governmental entity does want to submit this primary availability data, it also needs to meet this data specification that we released on March 4th for the ISPs. So governmental entities that want to submit this data need to be entities that specialize in gathering and or analyzing broadband availability data. And they will also need to explain how they have employed a sound, reliable methodology for collecting, organizing, and verifying the data that they are submitting. As I mentioned, the data needs to be in substantially the same format and include the same elements as coverage data submitted by service providers. So it needs to be in that data specification. And it needs to be filed in the BDC system during the same filing window using the same as of date as the data filed by service providers. So again, it needs to be coverage information as of June 30th of this year, and it needs to be submitted in the window no later than September 1st. And one other thing I should note is in the second report and order, the commission held that data that is coverage data that is collected directly from internet service providers cannot just be simply passed through and filed with us. There needs to be something else that the governmental entity has done to try and verify that data before submitting it to us. And as you can imagine, there's good reason for that. We are getting that data directly from the ISPs as part of their filings. So, rather than having the same data come in twice, to the extent that a governmental entity has gone out and collected something from a broadband service provider, it should tell us what additional steps it's taken to try and verify that data. So we also issued an order on that public notice that I was talking about from last summer, where we adopted some of the under the hood requirements for the mobile challenge process and our mobile verification processes. And at the same time, we also issued some data specifications for those mobile speed test applications. So they too will have to align their data in a way that fits our formats for our system. Again, that's not something that, consumers or most people who aren't developing their own speed test applications need to worry about. We will also be issuing in the future data specifications for the submission of bulk challenge data. So to the extent, you want a governmental entity wants to go out and do its own drive testing, it's not using, an app that it's downloaded, but it's using kind of its own hardware and software. I believe that will be covered in a future data specification, though now that I'm saying it, I may need to go double check because that may actually be included within the data specification that we released on March 9th, which is available on our website under the resources tab, which is fcc.gov/broadband data. So I want to talk a little bit about next steps, and I realize I'm coming up on time or close to it. So in terms of things that we have left, that the FCC has left to do before and going into the opening of this first filing window, we do plan to make detailed technical assistance resources available to participants in the challenge process, as well as people who will be submitting this availability data, the ISPs and governmental entities. Those resources are going to vary from self-help materials like frequently asked questions and webinars that we'll post on our website that people can review, to a help desk where you can call in and get support. And then even, for really thorny questions, we will have GIS specialists available to help with formatting and submitting data in the specifications. So all that's kind of being stood up currently, and our plan is to have all of that available before the opening of the window on June 30th. We do need to issue that public notice that I referred to briefly, explaining the process for how we will review and approve third-party mobile speed test applications for use in the mobile challenge and crowdsourcing processes. We are working on a public notice that provides details on how we will authenticate the entities that want to submit that, the governmental entities that will want to submit that verified primary availability data. Again, because the statute, speaks to, we will take data from entities that are primarily responsible for mapping or tracking broadband coverage. We need a way to just make sure that a person who claims to be acting on behalf of a state or locality actually is acting on behalf of a state or locality, and then ways to kind of check to make sure that they also meet those requirements under the statute. So that public notice we expect to be releasing in the not too distant future. I would say, days or weeks, not months. So that will come out very, very soon. Beyond that, we plan to open the window on June 30th. We will get the data in on or before September 1st. We will process it. Once it's processed, we'll render it on a public-facing map. And then once the maps are published, that will kick off the challenge and verification processes. So I'll just close with kind of a recommendation for which we've been telling other state and local organizations, consider the best way to participate in the process. If it may be submitting challenges either to the provider's availability data, or I should have mentioned the statute also requires that we allow for challenges to the fabric data. So if you have, detailed land records or other information on where broadband serviceable locations are, and you think that we have, failed to include some in our map, or we've misidentified them, once that information is published, you can participate by submitting challenges to both the fabric data as well as the broadband service providers availability data. You can also submit that primary availability data as long as it meets the technical requirements and the data specifications that I was discussing a little earlier. Or, you can also help with just collecting crowdsourced data, maybe being a conduit to collection of crowdsourced data that maybe doesn't meet the more stringent requirements of challenge data, but nonetheless, it can still come in and help inform the commission's verification inquiries and our audits and other steps that we plan to take to further refine and improve these maps. So again, our webpage is fcc.gov/broadband data. There you can find things like the data specifications that I was talking about, webinars, educational materials, all sorts of things. And if you have questions that we possibly don't get to today, I should also mention we have a unified email box that goes to a large number of people on the team, including myself. That email address is broadbanddatainquiries@fcc.gov. I will type it into the chat once I've stopped rambling. And please, if you have a question that either doesn't come up today or we don't get to today, that is a great way to get in touch with the subject matter experts to answer any questions you may have. But with that, that's the end of my remarks and presentation. And Jess, unless you jump in and say otherwise, I will turn it over to Ed.
Thanks, Sean. And thank you to the National Association of Regional Councils for inviting us to join you today, and everyone for taking time to tune in. I'm Ed Bartholomew, an Associate Bureau Chief in the FCC's Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, and I oversee the Commission's outreach and consumer education work, as well as our consumer complaints team. Before we dive in on the Affordable Connectivity Program, I wanted to share a timely update about another funding opportunity that may be of interest. The FCC's Emergency Connectivity Fund is a $7.17 billion program supported by appropriations that builds on the E-rate program structure. And it helps schools and libraries provide the tools and services their communities need for remote learning during the COVID-19 emergency period. For eligible schools and libraries, the ECF program covers reasonable costs of a laptop and tablet computers, Wi-Fi hotspots, modems, routers, and broadband connectivity purchases for off-campus use by students, school staff, and library patrons. The FCC recently announced that a third application window will open on April 28th of this year and close on May 13th. Eligible schools and libraries can request funding during this 15-day filing window for a maximum of 12 months of eligible services and equipment that will be received or delivered between July 1st, 2022 and December 31st, 2023. And we did drop the link to the Emergency Connectivity Fund webpage in the chat. I encourage you to visit that page, learn more about this new third filing window. There's also a really lengthy and well done FAQ that you can find on that page to answer all your questions about the program. So now I do want to turn quickly to the Affordable Connectivity Program, and I've got some slides I'll share with you today for that. So hopefully those are up and you can see them. But the Affordable Connectivity Program, or as we like to call it, the ACP, I'll cover what the benefit is, who's eligible, how households can apply, and provide an overview of the toolkit that the FCC developed to aid partners, navigators, and others directly serving their community to spread the word about this important program. I'll also share some websites where you can find more detailed information. I think it's important, though, as we start to talk about ACP, to talk a little bit about what changed. So many of you were probably familiar with the emergency broadband benefit, and the ACP is a new longer-term program that replaced the emergency broadband benefit on December 31st of 2021. It is no longer a COVID response program, and it does not have an end date tied to the pandemic. So the key changes: the maximum monthly benefit changed from $50 to $30 a month. The benefit remains at $75 for households on qualifying tribal lands. There are a couple new ways for households to qualify for the ACP, such as receiving WIC benefits or having an income at or below 200% of federal poverty guidelines. So under EBB and connected to the FCC's Lifeline program, the cap had always been 135%. Now with the ACP, that cap is 200% of federal poverty guidelines. There were two ways to qualify for the emergency broadband benefit that no longer apply in the ACP. And these are really COVID specific ways to qualify. So the first was a substantial loss of income as a result of a job loss or furlough since the end of February 2020, or if households met the qualifications for a participating provider's COVID-19 program. So those two ways into the EBB no longer work for the ACP. And for households that had qualified under those plans, which was a very small number of EBB households, they were contacted by the program administrator, USAC, or their internet service provider, and invited to re-qualify for the ACP. So also important to note, households enrolled in the EBB as of the end of last year did continue to receive their current up to $50 monthly benefit until March 1st of 2020. So this is really the first month where that benefit is a reduced amount, and they should see the $30 benefit instead of the $50 showing up on their bills. And most EBB households did not have to take any action to continue receiving the new $30 ACP benefit after March 1st. So moving to what the benefit is, the pandemic has shown everyone that broadband is truly need to have, and the ACP allows students to connect to classrooms, individuals work remotely, and it connects us all to family, friends, telehealth services, and other critical resources. The benefit does provide, as I mentioned, up to a $30 per month discount for broadband services, including associated equipment rentals such as a modem, up to a $75 a month discount for households on tribal lands, and a one-time discount of up to $100 for a laptop, desktop computer, or tablet purchased through a participating provider if the household contributes more than $10 and less than $50 towards the purchase price. And it's important to note that the connected device must be provided by the same provider that the eligible household is receiving discounted broadband service from as part of the Affordable Connectivity Program. It's not a coupon or a rebate, and it can't be used at third-party retail stores to buy a device. The ACP is limited to one monthly service discount and one device discount per eligible household. It's not a direct-to-consumer benefit. It's a discount off of the monthly service bill and or device, and then the service provider seeks reimbursement directly from the program. The program is administered by the Universal Service Administrative Company, or USAC. They also administer the Lifeline program, and they host the online application portal at acpbenefit.org. So next we'll talk about how households can qualify for the ACP. So households eligible for the ACP if the household income is, as I mentioned, at or below 200% of federal poverty guidelines, or if a member of the household meets at least one of the below criteria. Participates in certain assistance programs such as SNAP, Medicaid, federal public housing assistance, veterans pension and survivor benefits, SSI, WIC, or Lifeline. Participates in tribal specific programs such as Bureau of Indian Affairs General Assistance, Tribal TANF, Tribal Head Start, or Food Distribution Program on Indian reservations. If a member of the household participates in the National School Lunch or School Breakfast Program, including through the USDA's Community Eligibility provision. If someone in the household received a federal Pell Grant during the current award year, or meets the eligibility criteria for a participating provider's low-income internet program. And keep in mind that a household only needs to meet one of these eligibility criteria, not all 6 for the household to be eligible for the program. I mentioned Lifeline. Some of you may be familiar with the Lifeline program. It's a federal program that lowers the monthly costs of phone and internet services, and eligible households get up to $9.25 or up to $34.25 on tribal lands towards their bill. And you can learn more about the program at fcc.gov/lifeline-consumers. And current Lifeline participants are automatically eligible, and in most cases, they don't need to apply separately for the ACP, but they do need to select a service plan in order to start receiving the benefit. So current Lifeline recipients cannot be auto-enrolled in the ACP by their current Lifeline service provider. They need to provide affirmative consent before they can be enrolled. And households can receive both Lifeline and the ACP benefit at the same time. They can be applied to the same qualifying service or separately to a Lifeline service and an ACP service with the same or different providers. So for example, an eligible household could have a Lifeline supported mobile phone service and a separate home broadband service that's supported through the Affordable Connectivity Program. Next, we'll talk about how to enroll in the program. The program opened for enrollment on December 31st of last year, and there are 2 steps to enroll. The first is to go to acpbenefit.org to complete an online application or print out a mail-in application. You can also call 877-384-2575, and I have this on a later slide. Again, it's 877-384-2575 to request an application. Once you've completed the application and you've been notified that your application was approved, you then contact your preferred participating provider to select a plan and have the discount applied to your bill. Some providers do have an alternative application that they will ask households to complete as part of the process. And eligible households must both apply for the program and contact a participating provider to select a service plan. This is true even if they want to apply the benefit to their existing monthly service with a provider that they're already working with. And keep in mind that an individual applying for the benefit must sign the application and make other attestations in the online portal as part of the application process. A couple notes on participating providers. We have over 1,300 across the country that are participating, and the program is open to all broadband providers that meet program requirements, not just those that previously offered Lifeline services. Both fixed and mobile providers have elected to participate in the program, and you can find a list of participating providers by state and territory by visiting fcc.gov/ACP, and there you'll find a link to the providers listed by state. Next, I want to talk about some new program protections that are a part of the Affordable Connectivity Program. And these really build on lessons learned during the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. Consumers can choose the service plan that best meets their needs, including a plan they may already be on. Consumers can't be denied access to the program or program-supported services based on their credit. Eligible households cannot be excluded based on prior debt with a participating provider. And consumers can't be forced into more expensive or lower quality plans in order to receive the ACP. This is often referred to as upselling or downselling. Consumers also have the ability to change their benefit to a different participating service provider at any time. And many of the program rules are designed to reduce the potential for bill shock or other financial harms. In addition, we've created a dedicated ACP complaint process, and you can find that at consumercomplaints.fcc.gov. Again, that's consumercomplaints.fcc.gov, and we'll make sure that that gets added to the chat as well. Next, I want to quickly touch on a toolkit that we developed to help spread the word about the program. The Outreach Toolkit is a collection of social media materials, printables, and other tools designed to assist communities, partners, grassroots organizers, constituent services teams, navigators, raising awareness about the ACP program. We understand that local trusted partners are often best positioned to raise awareness in their communities. And with that in mind, we wanted to create easy to use materials that partners and others can grab and quickly hand out. These tools are free to use. They're downloadable, they're customizable. You can add local provider information to the back or any other details that you think your audience needs to know about the program. We currently have the materials available in English, Spanish, and 10 other languages. And again, you can find a link to this toolkit by visiting fcc.gov/ACP. Beyond the toolkit, we are excited to have some additional opportunities to promote the ACP. Congress did authorize as part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, new tools for the FCC to make use of, such as paid media, research, and focus groups. And the commission provided $100 million in funding for these efforts as part of the ACP report and order. These new tools will help to build awareness and drive enrollment for this new longer-term version of the program. And again, we understand the important role that state and local partners can play in promoting ACP awareness and building program trust. So if you administer programs that qualify households for the ACP at the state or local level, or if you have state and local offices that help residents enroll in similar assistance programs, we're eager to partner. And to help build out these state and local partnerships, the Commission, in paragraph 70 of the Affordable Connectivity Program order, directed staff to conduct a one-year test pilot, granting a limited number of neutral, trusted third-party entities, such as schools and school districts or other state or local governmental entities. It provides them with access to the national verifier for the purposes of assisting consumers with completing and submitting applications for the Affordable Connectivity Program. We're currently actively working to finalize the structure and the internal processes needed to launch this pilot program, and I'd encourage everyone to stay tuned. We should have more information to share soon. Along with the report and order establishing the program rules, the FCC also issued a further notice that seeks comment on establishing a new grant program for ACP outreach partners. Again, lessons learned in understanding the important role that local trusted voices can play and that they're often best positioned to encourage enrollment in government benefit programs like the ACP. So we're seeking comment on, in addition to an outreach grant program, we're also seeking comment on a program that would allow for everyone who is a recipient of federal public housing assistance to receive direct outreach about the Affordable Connectivity Program. And both the outreach grant program, the pilot program on federal public housing assistance, and questions about how to implement a high cost enhanced benefit as part of the ACP program. Those are all currently under the reply comment portion of the comment process, and those reply comments are due on April 15th, so that's this coming Friday. Shared quite a bit of information with you so far. I do want to leave up some information about where to find more details. So again, fcc.gov/ACP is our main website. And from there, you can link to an FAQ, toolkit, participating providers by state. acpbenefit.org is the online application portal for the program. There's also a support center that is staffed 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Time at 877-384-2575. And if you have additional follow-up questions after today's presentation, of course, you can always reach out to Gail and she can get you in touch to the right folks, but you can also send an email to acpinfo@fcc.gov. So with that, I will stop screen sharing and turn it back over to Jessica.
Thank you guys both. Those were fantastic presentations, a lot of information. We only have a few minutes, so I will ask some of the questions in the chat. The first one was maybe asked a little prematurely. It was, how can regional councils promote ACP among member cities and counties to ensure that the benefit is reaching those in need? I know you shared that resource page that has a lot of great information, but maybe there are some other ways that regional councils can help support the program.
Yeah, I think I would just encourage partnership, right? So we have the outreach toolkit page. You can grab whatever you need from there, co-brand it, customize it, but also let us know what else you might need. How can we best support you? I think keep an eye out for information about that pilot program. I think that could be another incredible opportunity to sort of show proof of performance around how can we work together to get households enrolled.
Great, fantastic. The next question is the FCC coordinating with regional councils or regional organizations as you build out and verify service provided in the location fabric?
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, so a couple of things there. I mean, I think first I want to clarify that the fabric itself is not availability data. I mean, the fabric will basically show geocoded information for particular broadband serviceable locations. So business and residences where fixed broadband, mass market fixed broadband should be expected to be delivered. The availability data will then be layered on top of that. And that data will obviously come first from the fixed internet service providers. But all that being said, absolutely, we want to coordinate with all of our governmental partners at various levels, whether it be other federal agencies, regional councils, counties, state governor's offices, state broadband offices. So once that data set is actually published, we can get feedback from all those sources, leveraging what you all have done out in the field, being closer to the actual locations, helping us figure out what further refinements to the map and pressure testing it, so to speak.
Yes, and while we're talking about maps, the final question, and folks, we have 1 minute, so maybe this will be the last question. You did talk about some of the dates coming up with the updated maps. Do you have an end date in mind, or when do you expect the updated maps to be available to folks?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, these maps are part of the BEAD program. I think I don't have an exact date in mind, though I will say that the chairwoman did testify before Congress last week or the week before last, and she said that we will have maps in the fall. So like that, I guess I can say that because she said it, and that's what we're doing. So I don't have like an exact date for you. All I can say is we are going to work as quickly as possible following the close of the window on September 1st to process the data and make it available. We want to make sure that, particularly with so much kind of riding on it and people being so interested in the data, that we get it right, and of course, like, it's not going to be 100% perfect. That's why we have all these other kind of checks and balances in place, but we do want to do as much as we can on the front end to make sure that what we put out initially has been, again, pressure tested and doesn't have any obvious patent errors or omissions, that sort of thing.
Great. Well, we are officially over time. So I would like to thank you both for joining us today. We truly value our relationship with FCC, and we can't wait to hear how these programs continue to advance. And I would also like to thank Mayor Stage for joining us and providing an introduction. And with that, I will leave you. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thanks.